guys, it's Maddie, and today I'll be doing my October wrap-up. Last month, that my theme for October was Owl Crate October. I had a goal to read most of my books that I've received through the Owl Crate book subscription service, and I definitely succeeded in that. I read 3 out of 6 books that I received from Owl Crate, and overall they all ended up being really good books. So I definitely succeeded on that part, and I can't wait to show you guys the books from Owl Crate that I did end up reading. Getting in with the statistics of what I read this month, I read 3 contemporary books, 1 dystopian, 1 historical fiction, and 1 fantasy. I read 2 4 stars, 1 4.5 stars, 3 5 stars, and I DNF'd 1 book. I read a total of 2,160 pages. So let's just get started. Again, the way I do my wrap-ups is I start from my least favorite book to my most favorite book, my favorite book of the month. So we're going to go in that order. So starting off on a bad note, unfortunately, I have 1 book that I did DNF this month, and that is The Love That Split the World. I was so literally devastated to have to DNF a book because I have not DNF'd a book in so long. I rarely ever don't finish a book, but this one I just could not for the life of me get into. This was one of my books from Owl Crate, which makes it even worse and more painful. It's a romance story, which you'd think I'd like it. It's like a romantic contemporary book because that is like my genre. But the thing was that this book had so much to do with psychology that it was just so confusing, and I just didn't get it. And above all, I found this book to just be so odd. Nothing I've ever read before, but not in a good way, because it was just confusing and it was weird. It had so many types of genres and subjects thrown into it, which could be good sometimes, but in this case it was just too many for me to follow along with. And so the weirdness of it, the psychology thing, I just wasn't into. This book was just personally not my cup of tea. I'm sorry to those of you who do really love this book, but it was just not for me, so I had to DNF it. And probably I'm gonna have to end up giving it away, or I don't know if I'll sell it. I'll probably just give it away because I'm never gonna pick it up again. But fortunately, yeah, I had to quit on this one, and hopefully I won't have to quit and DNF another book in a long time after this one, because I absolutely can't stand doing it, but sometimes you just kind of have to, and that was the case with this book. Alright, now getting into the books that I actually read. Next, I have The Giver by Lois Lowry. This was my TBR jar pick of the month, and again, the TBR jar has been good to me because I ended up really liking this book. This book is all about a world where nobody is different. Everyone is the same. There's no differences between everyone. There may be physical differences, but they all pretty much in some way look the same. And decisions are made for everyone in this community. Decisions are made by the elders on who they marry, what their jobs will be. Overall, the purpose for keeping everything the same is that there will be no drama, there will be no conflict, unemployment, divorce, all of that. The world will just be a better place because everyone is the same. So this story follows Jonas, and he is due to be assigned to his permanent job, since everyone, when they reach their 12th year, is assigned a job that they will have for the rest of their lives. He receives this unique job of being the receiver of memory. And the receiver's job is to receive memories from the giver of what life used to be like before this whole sameness thing took place. And so once he starts receiving these memories, he realizes that there's so much more to the world than just being the same, and that's really life has just been taken away from his community, and that it's not really fair. So now he's doing everything he can to fix that and make people to give the right to have decisions and to be different and unique from others. I really enjoyed this book. One of the reasons I probably enjoyed it because it was a dystopian book, and I really liked how this was just the beginning of the dystopian genre. This book, I believe, came out in the early 90s. I'm not sure if I'm correct on that, but it came out a long time ago, before The Hunger Games, before Divergent, all of the big dystopian books nowadays. This was just the beginning of it, and just the message in this book was just great, and it just taught me how important it is to have your own decisions, for everyone to just be different from each other. One thing I found sad about this book is that there's no love. No one is allowed to love. The word love is not even supposed to be uttered at all. You can't say that word at all. And it just like reminded me how important love actually is, and that it is a good thing to have it in the world. And another thing I liked about this book is that it kind of told me that even if living in a world where you are able to make decisions on who to marry, what your job will be like, all of that, even though some of those decisions and some of the things that are in our world can be painful, it's worth living just to have life, because there's really just no life you can have with just everyone being the same and decisions making for you. It's just not a way to live. So yeah, overall what I'm saying is this book had a lot of deep messages in it, and I really loved it. I loved all the characters too, and the writing was just really kind of unique and just flowed nicely. And I would really recommend this to you guys if you haven't read it yet, especially if you're into dystopian books, because I think this is like one of the beginning of dystopian right here. And I did watch the movie immediately after reading it, and I enjoyed the movie too. So that I would also recommend the movie, because I think it did a really good job at portraying this book. And I think the movie also mentioned some things from the book that I hadn't even thought about before. So I think really the movie is kind of vital to watch along with this book. I would highly recommend both. And I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I have is This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. I've heard a lot about Victoria Schwab, and I've just been wanting to read one of her books for a really long time, and I finally got to reading one, and I think this is her newest release, and I really enjoyed it. This book is about a world where monsters exist, and monsters are born when an act of violence is committed. There are 3 breeds of monsters in this world, which are the Korsai, the Maokai, and the Sunai, and each has a specific ability that they are able to do that can really harm humans. So this book follows Kate, who is a human, and August, who is a monster. They are both on opposing sides of this world who are constantly in conflict, and they're both the heirs of their opposing side. But inevitably these two actually meet, and they don't really get along at first, but then they start to become friends. So part of this book is all about a friendship between a human and a monster, but also about them living in this world and trying to fix some of the problems that are arising in it, with the opposing sides getting into war because they specifically do not want war to take place. I really have to give props to this book for really coming up with the most fascinating world I have ever read about. I've never read a book about monsters before, and I did love all the characters in this book, and for one thing I also thought, like I mentioned, that the world building was done so well. This book also has no romance in it whatsoever, so for those of you who don't like to read about romance, or are like me who actually does love to read about romance, then I would highly recommend for you to read this book. And I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I have My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. So this book is a fictional story about Jane, the Queen of England. She ends up getting into an arranged marriage that her cousin King Edward arranged, so she's not too happy about that, but she ends up getting married to Gifford. And in the beginning of this story, King Edward is removed from his throne, and he deemed Jane to be his heir to the throne. So Jane becomes Queen of England, which she does not initially expect, but that happens. But the thing is that there are a lot of conspiracies going on throughout her reign as queen that is putting her in a lot of danger. The funny thing about this book that I did not expect at all is throughout this world, this universe in this book, people are able to change into animals, which I thought was just fantastic because that really contributed to the comedy aspect of this book, and it made this book so funny. I think without the changing into animals concept, this book wouldn't have been what it was, of how funny it was and how ridiculous it was at the same time. There are a lot of other characters introduced throughout the book who have different animals that they can change into. I loved every character in this book, but my favorite was King Edward. I loved his character so much. This book is told through 3 point of views, which is Edward, Jane, and Gifford. Every single one of Edward's chapters I absolutely loved. It's just so funny. He's a 16-year-old king, and he's someone who does not want to be king at all because he feels like it robs him so much of his freedom, and he just wants more freedom and being king is just too restrictive for him. Also has this dying need to kiss a girl before he dies. Like that is like his one goal, is to kiss a girl, which I think is just so funny. You never really hear that out of a guy. Their one goal before they die is to kiss a girl. That is just so funny, and I thought he was just a hilarious character after all, and it's so sweet too. I really thought he was super sweet throughout this book in a lot of different ways. I wasn't a big fan of Jane at first. I thought she was kind of dull in the beginning, but her character really developed overall, and she kind of became one of those strong female heroines, but in a different way, because this is like a historical fiction setting, and sometimes you usually think of those strong females in like dystopian books, but this was a whole different take on the strong female type, and I really started to love her in the end. And Gifford I obviously thought was hilarious because he is a horse for most of the book, which was really just entertaining to see. And another thing I forgot to mention is that Jane loves reading, and that made me connect to her character so much. She loves books, she loves reading. Like, I feel like anyone who loves reading, and any of you out there who obviously do love reading, so watching this channel, you have to love reading, you would really connect to Jane's character. So I really like that about her too. And I think the romance was so well done. It was so cheesy, but the cheesiness is what made it adorable. I absolutely love that about it. There were two romances in this book that I loved so much, and I was rooting for them. And when they did actually like start to develop and happen, I was so happy, and it gave me all the feels. And this book was just so cute and so great. I've never read a historical fiction book before, and I'm really glad that this was my first one, because I really ended up really just enjoying it, and would highly recommend it if you haven't picked it up yet. And I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. So I had to put my pants back because it's getting so hot in here, which it is fall, so that is completely ridiculous. So the next book I have is My Heart and Other Black Holes by Jasmine Wonka. This book deals with two characters. One, the main character, Azelle, is unfortunately wanting to kill herself, and so she ends up going on to this website that helps you find a suicide partner. So she ends up finding a partner in this boy named Roman, and they meet up and they plan for a specific date, which is, I think I remember, it is April 7th, I think. Let me double check on that. Yeah, it is April 7th. They plan to kill themselves that day. So all throughout this book, they're still planning to kill themselves, but they're also starting to develop a relationship with each other. This book deals with Azelle figuring out that she doesn't actually want to kill herself, and now she's trying to convince Roman to keep wanting to live, and so that they could be together. This book was so great. It handled the aspects of like the heartbreak of suicide so well. The ending of this book, I'm not even kidding, just had me in tears. Like, not in a sad way, it was a happy tears. So I was just like sobbing, and I'm like, oh my goodness, it just pulled at my heartstrings, and I just really love this book. If you want a book that gives you so many feels, read this one, because it was just so good. The characters were amazing. I think they were all so well developed, and I think the romance was well developed too. The romance is the main part of this book that really had my heart just like bleeding, I guess, literally. So I really love this. It is a great book about suicide and mental illness, and I just overall just really enjoyed it, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I have another mental illness that deals with suicide, and that is All the Birthplaces by Jennifer Niven. This book has been on my TBR for, I want to say, like almost 2 years, which is ridiculous, and I finally got to it. This book is about Finch and Violet, and the way they meet at the top of their school bell tower as they are deciding if they want to jump off the tower. They both don't end up jumping off, and instead they hang out more. They are involved in a school project together where they are assigned to visit certain destinations all over their state, and through that they get to know each other a lot more, and eventually they start a romantic relationship, and they end up just both making each other just really happy. So it's another like pulling out your heartstrings type of book, because it does deal with suicide and mental illness. And whenever I picked this book up, I just did not want to put it down. It was so great. It left me wondering what was going to happen next. This book was told in dual perspective between Finch and Violet, and I found both of their voices to be so different from one another that I felt like the fact that it did have dual perspective really added a lot to the book in the way that both their voices were very different, so both of their takes on the story were really interesting. Finch was someone who was really sarcastic. He's in a way kind of geeky and kind of silly, but he also does have his problems, so that leaves him in getting depressed, and hence the reason why he wants to kill himself. And Violet can be very serious, but she's also really funny too, even though I did still like Finch more because I loved his sarcasm so much. Both characters were great, the writing was amazing, and I can't wait to read more Jennifer Niven's books. I want to read Holding Up the Universe. I know that book came out just recently and I'm like dying to read it because it sounds really good too. So I can't wait to read more from her, and I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars and would highly recommend if you haven't picked it up yet. And the last book I have, and this is my favorite book I read this month, is P.S. I Like You by Casey West. This book was just so cute. It like exploded with cuteness within the pages, I swear. This book is about a girl named Lily, and she is a songwriter, and one day she's in chemistry class and she's bored, so she decides to write song lyrics to her favorite band on her desk. But then the next day, she looks at her desk and realizes that someone has finished the rest of the lyrics for her. And this mysterious person has also left a letter to her. So over time, these two start exchanging letters anonymously throughout chemistry class. And now she is trying to figure out who is her secret pen pal. And she also realizes that she's also starting to fall in love with the person that she's actually writing. She doesn't even know who he is. This book was so fantastic. This is one of those books that are just so up my alley. I knew I was going to love this book because yes, it is contemporary romance and that is my favorite genre, so I knew overall that I was going to like it, and I did. It ended up being my favorite book I've read this month. Within the first 5 chapters, I figured out who the mysterious pen pal was. That was kind of unfortunate, but it was at the same time really obvious. I think the author made it to be obvious, so either way, it doesn't even matter if I found out, because it was probably its intention was to be found out in the first place, because there were so many obvious clues that I saw before I even found out who the pen pal was. And once I did find out who it was, I was really hoping on the inside that it was actually that person, because I really wanted her to have a relationship with this person so bad. And in the end, when the mysterious pen pal was revealed, I was right, and I was so happy. I was like, yes. And I just really love this concept of this book. This is one of those books where I'm like, I really wish I would have come out with this idea, because it is so brilliant with the falling in love with someone through letters when you don't actually know who they are in person. And I just love that concept of it. And I also thought the romance was also developed so nicely. It wasn't insta-love. And what I liked about it, it was a kind of a hate at first, then turns into love relationship, which are my favorite relationships to read about ever. So that's another reason why I probably really love this book. And yeah, I really loved it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was my favorite book I read this month, and I am so excited to read more books by Casey West, because I think I have become addicted to her writing style now just from this book. So that was my wrap up for October. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below for more wrap ups and bookish related videos, and I will be back really soon. Bye.